In Islam, nikah is simple. It's actually easier to do nikah than it is to buy a house, for instance. To buy a house, you've got to go through contracts and lawyers. Nikah, 2 witnesses, a wali, a istijaba and a qabul, a proposal and acceptance. And you don't even have to have an imam there, by the way. Imam does not have to be there. It has to be 2 Muslim men, her wali, father, brother, uncle, and you can do a nikah within half an hour, and there's no age limit provided they are of aql, and there's no compulsion there, and there's clear acceptance. It's very simple.
That's how we do it in my family, right? In my family, we do it like in my family, I'll give you one example. One young lady in my family, when she was in the first year of university, she told her father she likes the guy. The next week, he brought the guy to the house, spoke to him, called the Maulana home, performed the nikah in the house, and 4 years later, they moved in together.
Exactly.
And they're still married, and they have 3 kids together now, and they've been married for 15 years now.
That is barakah. And Rasul told us about this, and we know now, the harder you make nikah, the easier zina becomes. And zina, people think it's a small sin. After murder, zina comes second. It is a huge sin. It's a humongous sin. It's humongous.
Number 3, murder, then zina. Those are the 3
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's a huge sin. Huge. Because we're living amongst, and I know South Africa, I'll watch the cricket sometimes, and I've got to turn my head away, because the women in the crowds in South Africa, particularly in South Africa, from all the countries in the world, and subhanAllah, it's, may Allah keep you firm on deen, but it's a hot country, and the fitting out there, and it doesn't make it halal though. Even if everyone's doing it, does not make it halal.
Yeah.
And this is the wonderful thing about Islam, because the Sahaba, the Tabi'in, the Tabi'in Tabi'in gave us examples. They went to China and to, all the way to Europe as well. After 3 generations after Rasul died, there were no Muslim countries, nations. They didn't indulge in what they did. They still kept the halal halal and the haram haram. It is not an excuse for us. We've normalized it now. They say when you get submerged in water, you become like a duck. But we must never sink. We must, even if the sins are coming to our ears where we live, we must never sink, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sharia is for eternity. It is not for just the one generation. It is for eternity. And speaking of marriage, Ismail, we've got a group where we, like I said, we introduce young brothers and sisters, especially at university. We go to universities and say, look, we speak to the fathers sometimes, and they're often being an impediment to the nikah process. And we're like, Uncle G, your daughter's going to, or son's going to, if you don't say yes to the nikah, which you will facilitate, bi'idhnillah, they're going to do zina. And zina, it will then be on your head as well, because you obstructed the path of nikah.
There is a hadith about where the Prophet ﷺ said, any young man who hits puberty and his parents stop him from getting married, the father will bear the burden of zina as well, because he was an obstacle to his son getting married. Now, the same applies to your daughter. If you are an obstacle between them and halal, you share in the sin of the haram.
Absolutely. And it's become so normalized now, and we're trying to educate brothers. I was 24 when I got married. 24, and 7-8 months outside of medical school, straight away, almost. I got having my first child from at 29. And wallahi, to this day, I don't know any. I think I know one doctor in 11 years who's done it before me. Every single doctor's like, you're silly, you're stupid, wait till you're 35. Because in their head, marriage is settling down. And like you said, marriage is not, in Islam it's not. Marriage is your trampoline. It will get you to the next level. A woman will bring her own risk. And even if you are poor, and Allah will provide for you. You still got to strive, tie your camel, but do not postpone marriage for wealth. Because you never know. A risk could come, it could be unlocked during marriage. And we're seeing, especially in the desi communities, the man's got to buy a house and he's got to spend so many thousands of pounds. This is an obstacle, and this is not from Islam. Islam is beautiful. Rasul got some of his poorest Sahabis married. Look at the story of Julaybi. There were poor Sahabi who got married. Because the nikah is simple in Islam.
And there's another concept here that I've seen now in the younger generation that's un-Islamic. and this idea that marriage is only for the wealthy, right? You look
Mhm.
at the Sahaba, even the poorest of Sahaba got married. I know
Exactly.
in South Africa, I know many people who are not doing well financially, but they are happily married. They're struggling together for the sake of Allah. They still love each other and care for each other, right? It's not just rich people. There's some people feel like you have to be at a certain financial level to get married, but that's never been what Islam taught. And it's, as you said, Allah will enrich you. Allah will take care
Yes.
of you. Some people, it is their test that they're going to go through life with poverty. That is Allah's test for that person.
Yeah.
Does that mean they never get married? No, they marry someone who's from their similar background to them, and they face the test of life together, right? It does make it easier to have someone to go through the trials of life together with, right?
Yeah.
But I've also seen this in my own life because I got married at the age of 20 and I became a father at the age of 21. This forced me to work harder in my 20s
Yes.
than everybody else I knew. Because you have in your mind, I am now Kawam, I'm now responsible for these people. I cannot afford to miss a bill. I cannot afford to miss rent. I have to build up my wealth. I have to build up myself financially. It forces you to grow up. It forces you to
Yes.
man up because you now have the responsibility of other people on your mind. But if you are living
Yes.
alone in your 30s, what's the motivation to do well in life?
Exactly.
At the end of the day,
Exactly.
women are simple creatures. We don't spend money on much things, right? The only thing we spend money on is our wife and children. That's really where our money goes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
ourselves, we don't really need much to be happy.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. It does force you to level up in a good way. Alhamdulillah, it's just really it incentivizes you to level up because you are now the qawam, you are now the shepherd of this family. You steer them in the right way. You must teach them deen. You are responsible for their tarbiyah, and you will be answerable for them on Yawm al-Qiyamah. So it forces you to level up. But if you're 30 living with your mother still and subhanallah being a burden on her, you have no incentive to level up because the house is paid off. It's your parents' house. It's paid off. Whatever. You have no one. You have no one to be answerable to. You have no one who is dependent on you.
Yeah,
Whereas when you have children and a wife, you are forced to financially improve, physically improve, mentally improve, socially and spiritually improve because you've got people now who are dependents on you.
yeah. Like one of the cases I'm dealing with
It's like
is like a 31-year-old who has no work ethic at all. Like he can't hold down a job. And I was trying to figure out why, and I realized his whole life he never needed to work. Like even if he gets a job and he quits after 2 weeks, his parents spoil him. They take care of everything. So,
yeah,
so what's the incentive there for him to ever become a hardworking man if he always has his parents to fall back on? Right? Parents don't
yes,
realize sometimes that we are
exactly.
our own enemies when we treat our adult children like this instead of forcing them to man up.
Absolutely. You're actually doing them a disservice. You're
Yeah.
doing them a disservice. You are not allowing them to grow, and you are pushing their potential inadvertently with love. I'd just say, you know, you are killing them with kindness. Subhanallah, you are killing them with kindness because you're killing their dream. And something you tweeted about the other day, it got a lot of traction on Twitter. You said the importance of marriage. That was the title of the tweet. And we live in a time in which marriage is slowly becoming a pale shadow of what it once was. And this is in part due to hedonism. And this is so true. Hedonism, like the pursuit of pleasure. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, to the nearest meaning in English, have you not seen the one who takes his shahawat and his hawa, his desires as his ilah, as his God, as his, as his compass in life? And we're seeing this in the West. Desires for fame, desires for money, desires for women. Subhanallah. And this, you're right. And we see it. Alcoholism destroying marriage, gambling destroying marriage, womanizing destroying marriage. Subhanallah. So many of these desires, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about, are now, you mentioned in a tweet, are destroying marriage. What trends are you seeing with your counseling and your coaching that you're doing? What kind of things are destroying marriage?
So marriage is being destroyed by one of two things: desires or wrong ideas, right? Desires would be, for example, people committing adultery, pornography addiction,
Mm-hmm.
materialism, just wanting more and more of the dunya, being really, really greedy for the dunya, thinking you can do better, right? Thinking that
Yeah.
there's a better man or woman out there for you instead of making shukr for what Allah has provided you with. This is all desire, really. That's what this is. Or another type of desire that we don't talk about is the desire that, you know what, if I'm not married to this man or woman, I can do whatever I want. There's no one calling me out for committing sins. So a lot of people get divorced so they can commit more sins, right? Like I know of some sisters whose husbands used to make them wear hijab, and they wanted to walk around without hijab, so they got a divorce, and now they got pictures of themselves on Instagram with no hijab at all. So in this case, it's completely desires that right? The desire to show one's beauty to the world, which is a sin, and that's the desire side. The other side, the other cause of divorce is wrong ideas, like what's the role of a man or a woman in a marriage, right? People have very strange ideas about it today. I remember when I was teaching a youth program a few months ago, one of the high school girls told me that she wants to work and she wants her husband to be a house husband who stays home and takes care of the kids. I'm like, why is a 15-year-old girl thinking like this? Like, it's such a bizarre, unnatural thought process, right? Like, why would a woman want to marry a man who's going to be staying home while she works? How did we get this flipped upside down as a community? But these are wrong ideas that the younger generation are being fed, right? And this affects how they enter marriage. So, for example, a lot of young girls are not taught about men. They don't understand male sexual desire. They don't understand masculinity. They don't understand how men talk, right, or how men think. And as soon as they get married, they're offended by everything their husband thinks or says or does because they have no understanding of men, right? And we can say the same thing with some men and women. They have no understanding of women, and so when they get married, they're shocked. But I'm thinking more with the sisters that, for example, a lot of young ladies are not taught that men, especially men with high testosterone levels, they need a lot of intimacy, right? They need a lot.
Yes.
A lot of young ladies are not taught that. And then this is like the most common question young ladies come for counseling, like, my husband wants too much. And I say, what's too much? 3 or 4 times a week. That's not too much, that's normal.
That's normal, yes, exactly. SubhanAllah.
Teaching them, right? And so they think that this is bizarre and this is their husband only, but not realizing, we really have to have premarital courses where we teach people these things. What are men like? What are their desires? What are their needs? What are women like? What are their desires? What are their needs? You go into marriage with knowledge of what you're getting into. We are not preparing the younger
Absolutely.
and so they go in with very bizarre ideas, complete lack of understanding of the opposite gender, and this causes the marriage to fall apart within 1 year.
No, absolutely. And our Imam at the masjid says, SubhanAllah, some people are getting married, big wedding, going on honeymoon, and coming back on separate planes after a week. Because they spent months, maybe years, preparing a wedding, but not the marriage. And we prepare, I'm speaking particularly to the sisters here, we prepare them with feminism and careerism. We prepare them to become doctors and architects and engineers. But that's a secondary duty. The first duty is to be the Mu'mineen. That's the mothers of the Ummah, of the believers, and the mothers and righteous wives. رَبَّنَا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا. Corners of eyes. So we're preparing them to be doctors and lawyers and dentists and whatnot, and then they're not ready in their mid-20s. And then when they do get married, they have no, like you said, conception of what a man wants. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Maryam, the boy is not like the girl. ذَكَرَ وَأُنْثَى. They're not alike. And with different psychology, I speak a lot about this in my podcast. The psychology of a man is different, and this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is our fitrah. We have higher levels of testosterone, therefore our executive functioning is different. We have lower levels of oxytocin, lower levels of progesterone, and lower levels of estrogen. So the chemicals that bathe our brain are different. We have a higher sex drive, we have more aggression. Women are going into marriage thinking all men are like their dad. A lot of men now, particularly the previous generation, have been emasculated. So the only conception of a husband they have is from their father, who was dominated by their mother. So when they marry a high testosterone man, it ends up in divorce after a few months or maybe a year or so, because they're not used to what a high test man wants. They're not used to his frame. They're not used to him leading, because they saw their mother leading the marriage. So, and they're not being prepared. They're going into marriage willfully ignorant. And subhanAllah, this is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. So, like, one of the things I've been teaching my community, I keep repeating this phrase: we are preparing our children to be good students and to have good careers. We're not preparing them to be husbands or wives or mothers or fathers. And this is a disaster.
Yes.
Absolute disaster. We're seeing it with the younger generation that they have no idea how to interact with the opposite gender, right? And it's, again, you mentioned the example of where women grew up in a family where the men are, where the father was emasculated. But I'm seeing it even in families where it's not the case, right? Because alhamdulillah, in South Africa, we still have a lot of manly men, right? We still have this culture where the men are qawwam, and some of them have multiple wives, and the leaders in the home. Alhamdulillah, the culture is still there in South Africa. But still, with the younger generation, despite growing up in a home like that, because of school, because of the media, what they're seeing on Netflix, what they're seeing on YouTube, what they're seeing on TikTok, they're still growing up with these wrong ideas about men, right? So it's like they're ignoring the example of their home, and they want to be like they want to be like the ladies they see on TV. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but in the past 10 years, the portrayal of men and women in TV has really changed, right?
Yes.
Like, I first noticed this like 10 years ago when they started portraying Supergirl as stronger than Superman, right? I don't know if you noticed this. They actually started portraying Supergirl as stronger than Superman. And the way she talks to him is very condescending, putting him down.
Yes.
And he's a chump next to him. And now he's seeing that rolling out, right? So now Spider-Man, the new Spider-Man's an idiot, right? He's a skinny little kid. His girlfriend's taller than him, more intelligent than him. There's a lot of hidden emasculation taking place in these ideas. Women are no longer damsels in distress that need to be saved. They're now the one doing the saving.
Yeah.
Now the ladies, what's their conception of a marriage or a relationship between a man and woman look like? Right? Their role models on TV are literally these manly women who have like no.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I've got this theory. Which I've spoken to a few brothers about. But it'll be good to get your opinion on this as someone who's learned and mashallah, formally Islamically qualified. So Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told us, he forewarned us about Dajjal, and we mentioned Surah Kahf on Fridays. Dajjal's fitna, we hope not to be alive during that time. We hope not to be alive. But there's no doubt things are heading that direction. They have been since Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. His birth was the beginning of the end of times. His birth was the beginning of the end of times. Because he's the last prophet now. So we are approaching the end of times. So Rasul Sallallahu told us that majority of his followers will be female. That actually a man, when he hears about Dajjal, who will try to force his mothers and wives and sisters to be in the house, or words to that effect, because they'll go out, they'll come back and follow him. During the time of Rasul Sallallahu, this might not have made a difference, because generally, Qawwam, men, al-rajul qawwamuna ala nisa. This wasn't groundbreaking, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, al-rajul qawwamuna ala nisa, because even the jahils of the Quraysh at the time, they still had them. It was a patriarchy, in essence, still, the man was at the top. So this hadith, it might not have been of that importance to the Sahaba, because they thought, even if Dajjal comes, the majority of his followers will be women, it does not make a difference, because we are still the Qawwam. We can still reason with them and say, look, he's Dajjal, he's not the real Messiah. But now, Ismail, tables have turned 30, 40 years. More women at university now, more, especially in the West. 60%, I think. Medical school, much more women in medical school. Only engineering remains, engineering, maths and physics remain female dominated. Male dominated. But majority of degrees now are much more female. So more women are getting degrees, equal number in the workforce, positions of power, and more importantly, feminism, which you mentioned about today in your tweet. Feminism. This seems to be the dominant ideology of today's society. So when Dajjal does come, the accursed one, he will obviously be in a society where feminism because feminism, it's not going to regress, by the way. You're going to have fourth wave, fifth wave, 10th wave, 20th wave. Whenever he comes, it will still most likely be a feminist society, because I don't think we're going to go backwards to a patriarchy. It's going to be a matriarchy. So when he comes, it will be a femme-centric society. And this hadith for me then makes more sense, because the majority of his followers will be female, and the majority of the power will be in female hands, the way things are going. Therefore, the fitna will be pronounced. The fitna will be very, very pronounced. The majority of the statesmen, the people that move the needle, the majority of power within the house will be with the females. So when they start following him, the whole dynamic changes compared to what it would have been during Rasul's time. Does that make sense?
I don't really think I agree 100%, right? Firstly, when it comes
it's just a theory from my mind.
I understand what you're saying, but I don't think I agree 100%, right? For 2 points.
Yeah.
Point number one, any hadith about something that's going to happen in the future, we can never say for sure that the way we're connecting the dots is how it's going to be, right? It could be something completely different from what we think, right? It could be that this feminism thing ends and 1,000 years later, Dajjal pops up in a completely different world, a completely different society, a completely different set of reasons, right? Or it could be what you said. But again, this is speculation about the future. I don't like to do that, right? That's point number one. Point number two, I know a lot of Muslims have this idea that we're living in the end times and Dajjal is coming soon and Mahdi is coming soon. I actually don't agree with this mindset, right? My perspective is that we don't know when the world's going to end.
Yeah.
It could end in 100 years' time. It could end in 1,000 years' time. We could be living in a blip of time of history. And it could be within the next 50 years, humanity realizes feminism was a mistake and we go back to the natural way of living. It's perfectly possible. Right? If a new khilafat happens, that's going to happen. Right? You think a khilafat's going to be matriarchy? No, it's a man at the top. Right? So the things will flip around. And then this will just be a footnote in the history books. That's for like 50 or 60 years in human history, there was this feminism thing. Right?
Yes.
So
exactly.
I don't agree 100%. I feel that's possible. What you're saying is possible. But it's also possible that that's completely unrelated. That's also possible.
Yeah, exactly. Because you have to view history from contextually. So even this, it's just a era. So for us, 40, 50 years seems like a lot.
I have a theory of history that this ummah goes through phases, right? We had for about 600 years the Arab Khilafat, the Umayyads and the Abbasids. Then we had like 100-year period of devastation. The Mongols, the Crusaders, no Khalifa. Then we had a 600-year period of the Turkish Khilafat, the Ottomans.
Yes.
Now we're going through a 100-year period of devastation and no Khalifa.
Yes.
So my theory is perhaps now a third Khilafat will pop up for another 600 years from a different nation. If history
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you mentioned 100 years. It'll be exactly 100 years next year.
Yeah.
1924. 100 years exactly. Ataturk and Ottoman Empire. And
Khilafat pops up in our lifetime. And then we're in a different phase of history altogether.
Absolutely. And maybe this feminism was just a temporary fitna. It was a temporary fitna. Just like the Mongols, they were a fitna. They were a huge fitna. They came to Baghdad and just, as you know, and
I
that was a fitna for them.
I would compare it more to the Mu'tazila, right? The Mu'tazilite came about, they caused a lot of fitna, there was the whole Inquisition, but now they don't exist anymore. They're just something you read about in history books. Right?
Yes, exactly.
Philosophy and ideology that gripped the minds of many Muslims for about 100 years and then it disappeared. Feminism might go through the same cycle.
Yeah, exactly. The Khawarij, etc. We've seen people come and go in that.
Exactly.
And this is the Sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran. Empires coming and falling. Yeah, it's in the Quran many times. It's travel and see the end of those that came before you. Before you. And again, because we are living in this society, in this current status quo, where never before has there been. But we mustn't forget the story of Sulaiman alayhi salam in the Quran, where the head of the state of Sheba was a female, although she had male. But so it's happened before but it's always a footnote in history. These things are as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, these are tales of the ancients. One day we will also be tales of the ancients as well. I mentioned this on my tweet yesterday or the day before. So many great minds are buried beneath us. We are in this hyper individualism, like you mentioned at the beginning. We feel as we are history. We actually just a small, if you look at history, human history since Adam and Islam, we are just a millisecond in that.
I feel like what we're going through right now is so unsustainable in the long term that it's going to die out. This is not sustainable. People are not getting married. People are not having children. People are adapting alternative sexualities. None of that is sustainable for humanity or for a civilization. It's going to pop eventually, right? It's going to implode eventually. So I don't see this as a permanent fitna. I see this as a phase that will pass.
Yeah, exactly. It will pass. And the beautiful thing about Islam is it gives you perspective. We know how things will end with Mahdi, with Isa alayhi salam, with the Khilafah, etc. Islam gives a beautiful, perspective on life events, and we just have to maintain firm on our deen. And it's a great way to end this because it's talked about history and the Umayyads, the Abbasids, the Mongols, the 1924, the Ottoman Empire, etc. How can people find your course online and just give a quick 20-second summary, and then inshallah we'll end the podcast. How can people find it and what's it about?
Okay, so if you go to my website, IslamicSelfHelp.com, you'll find the course links there. My two most popular courses is History of Islam, which has over 100 5-star reviews at the moment, over 2,000 students. And my latest one on Foundations of a Strong Marriage. I will be launching one soon on parenting. The marriage course is pretty much a summary of everything you need to know before getting married. It's 20 modules covering everything from what is a marriage, the importance of getting married young, the needs of men, the needs of women, communication, overcoming conflicts, polygamy, misyar, all of that is covered. And the history course, which is my most popular course, is chronologically the history of Islam from the time of Rasulullah ﷺ until modern times, until the formation of Israel, covered in 30 videos. So it's 30 videos covering 1,400 years of history. The reason I put this course together is I did not find anything in the English language that covered this as comprehensively, right? Specifically like the Ottoman period. I spent 8 hours on the Ottoman Empire. So my next big task is converting that into a book, which will take about 2 years, inshallah. Hopefully by 2025, I can publish a book on that topic. But right now, if people want to learn about the history of Islam or proper, authentic marriage according to Quran and Sunnah, head over to IslamicSelfHelp.com and you'll find the links to both courses over there.
Jazakallah khair. Brilliant. And I'll put the link in the bio. Ismail, Jazakallah khair for your time. It's been really, really insightful. I could speak to you for hours. If you're ever in the UK, please do come visit me in Sheffield. And, Jazakallah khair for your time. And thank you so much.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure. Assalamu alaikum.